Hell yeah, dude. 90 episodes of Haunts, Graves, and Omens today.
It's crazy.
It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
We went from starting this podcast on a couch to being in chairs. Talk about a come up.
I think technically the come up is that we started in a living room and now we're in a studio.
Yes. Well, yeah.
I think technically.
Yeah, it's true.
I
Probably.
want to make it sound nicer
Whatever.
than us just changing our seating arrangement.
That was part of the joke. That was so a joke. You know, I'm not gonna explain it. You should have figured it out over the last 90 episodes. Welcome to Haunts, Graves, and Omens.
Welcome.
My name is Fred Stewart, and with me as always is my lovely co-host.
Hi, it's me. It's Taylor.
Hi, Tay.
Hi.
And with us, running cameras and sound, it's Marty Cowick. Dude, gangster, dude. You look
Gangster.
crazy.
We were just listening to Eazy-E before this, and I got in one of those G modes.
Yeah, dude. 90 episodes of Haunts, Graves, and Omens. We are just 10 short episodes away from our episode 100 special, and I'm very, very excited. It's going to be quite a blast. We'll probably end up live streaming as we do it. Still figuring out plans, but nonetheless, it's going to be a fantastic one. At the top of the show, I just want to cover some true crime news. Alabama wants to be the first state to execute a prisoner by making him breathe nitrogen.
Oh.
So this comes from apnews.com. Alabama is seeking to become the first state, obviously, to execute a prisoner by using pure nitrogen. The Alabama Attorney General's office on Friday asked the state Supreme Court to set an execution date for inmate Kenneth Eugene Smith, age 58. The court filing indicated Alabama's plans to put him to death by nitrogen hypoxia, an execution method that is authorized in 3 states but has never been used.
Is that like asphyxiation, kind of?
Kind of. Hypoxia is the lack of oxygen.
Okay.
So basically, I've been hypoxic before. It was when I almost drowned. You basically lose your motor functions and you kind of become this kind of delirious state. It's because your brain's literally being derived of oxygen. And then you eventually will basically just fall asleep.
Yeah.
So basically, nitrogen hypoxia is caused by forcing the inmate to breathe, obviously, nitrogen only, depriving him of oxygen, letting him to die. Nitrogen makes up 78% of the air inhaled by humans, but is harmless while oxygen is being inhaled. Basically, with this, it's going to be a more inhumane way of executing prisoners.
Inhumane? More inhumane?
More humane.
Oh, okay.
Another fun story is a Portland serial killer dies at home after a sentence of just probation. This comes from Fox News. Homer Lee Jackson III killed 4 sex workers between 1983 and 1993, eluded capture until 2015. He was then walked free in a plea deal in 2002 following a court battle over a controversial confession. He is now dead. Discovered in his home by his sister after succumbing to an illness, according to reports. He was charged for the sexual assault and strangulation of people from the age of 14 to 29 and multiple other victims. So basically, the judge threw out his confession amid allegations of improper tactics used by the 2 lead investigators. Oregon Supreme Court upheld the decision, finding their methods and inducements may have been persuaded the defendant to tell the detectives what they wanted to hear, whether or not it was the truth. Jackson was diagnosed with schizophrenia and, according to the report, had a bad memory. Court records show that his first-degree murder charges were dismissed and that it was only convicted of 4 counts of criminally negligent homicide. In addition to the 4 murders, he had a prior arrest for burglary and DUI, and now he's dead. So that's pretty fun. And then you're never going to guess who's back in the news, but it's BTK. Because he can't keep his grubby little fat hands out of anything. Again, it comes from Fox News. BTK called prime suspect in cold cases. Serial killer says search for more bodies underway because he won't shut the fuck up ever. BTK is like, people aren't talking about me? They gotta start talking about me again. He's a grubby little fuck, and this guy is just insane. if you don't know, go watch our episode about BTK, but he's convicted of killing at least 10 people in Kansas between 1974 and 1991, confessing in 2005 after he was arrested because he used a floppy disk and they traced his IP because he's an idiot, which is one of my favorite serial killer stories. But basically, detectives have circled back to a 1976 disappearance of 16-year-old cheerleader from her aunt and uncle's laundromat in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. And they believe that he was involved. So I'm sure we'll find out more about that. But pretty interesting, pretty wild stuff.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's certainly something. But we have a long episode ahead of us. So are you guys ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
Let's get it.
All right. On February 6th, 2002, police executed a search warrant on a farm in Coquitlam? If I'm butchering that, I apologize. BC, Canada. Little did they know that a real-life horror they would find and what it would uncover. This is the story of Robert Pickton, a.k.a. the Pig Farmer Killer.
Oh.
So Robert Pickton was born to Leonard Francis Pickton and Louise Helen Arnold, a family of pig farmers in the British Columbia area, about 17 miles east of Vancouver. Pickton's older sister, Linda Louise Wright, was sent to live with relatives in Vancouver as their parents thought that the family pig farm would be an inappropriate setting to raise a young girl, but for a young boy, it's certainly fine.
Obviously.
Robert and his younger brother, David Francis Pickton, they gave all these family members names like they're also serial killer, which is, it's like David Francis Pickton. Began working on the farm at an early age, and their mother was very demanding, prioritizing the pigs over the boys' personal hygiene and forcing them to work long hours raising the farm's livestock. She often sent them to school in unwashed, dirty clothes, reeking of manure, and earning the brothers the nickname Stinky Piggy from their classmates because, of course, they're kids. Pickton was strongly attached to his mother and had little interaction with his abusive father. Pickton struggled in school, but was being put into special classes after failing out of the second grade. At the age of 12, Pickton began raising a calf, which became his beloved pet. 2 weeks later, after failing to find it after school, he was told to check the barn, where he was heartbroken to find it slaughtered.
Oh.
He later dropped out of school in 1963 and began working as a meat cutter. He continued to do so for nearly 7 years before leaving to work full-time at the farm. In 1994 and 1995, Pickton and his two siblings inherited the family's pig farm, selling parts of their inherited land and a total earning of about $5.16 million in Canadian dollars. Worker Bill Hiscox, swear to God, that's how it's spelled. Called the farm a quote creepy looking place, patrolled by a 600-pound boar, and described Pickton as quote pretty quiet guy, hard to strike up a conversation with, whose occasional bizarre behavior, despite no evidence of substantial abuse, would draw attention. He was a weird guy. He's willy weird.
Willy weird?
Willy weird. So, kind of skip forward a little bit. On March 23rd, 1997, Pickton was charged for the attempted murder of a prostitute named Wendy Lynn Eyster, whom he had stabbed several times during an altercation at the farm. Wendy had informed the police that Pickton had handcuffed her, but that she had escaped after suffering several lacerations. She told them that she disarmed him and stabbed him with his weapon.
Oh.
Pickton sought treatment at the Eagle Ridge Hospital, while Wendy recovered in the nearest emergency room. He was released a because of course he was, on $2,000 bond, and an attempted murder charge against Pickton was stayed on January 27th, 1998. Because of Miss Wendy had a drug addiction issues, and prosecutors believed her to be too unstable for her testimony to help secure a conviction.
Great.
Yeah. You're on drugs, which means you don't know what you saw. Time and time again, we have this conversation on Hot Scrapes and Omens. Over the last 90 episodes, I'm sure we've had it way too many times.
Yeah.
Furthermore, David Pickton was convicted of sexual assault in 1992, being fined $1,000 and given 30 days of probation. In that case, the victim told police that David had attacked her in his trailer at the pig farm, but managed to escape. Pickton had also been sued 3 times for traffic offenses in 1998 to 1991, settling all 3 claims out of court. He was just kind of a weird guy and a scumbag right away.
Yeah.
You know. So the Pickton brothers were eventually sued by the Port Coquitlam. I think I'm saying that right. Coquitlam. Sure. Officials for violating zoning ordinances, neglecting the agriculture for which it has been zoned, and having, quote, altered a large farm building on the land for the purpose of holding dances, concerts, and other recreations. Typical city ordinance stuff. They began to neglect the site's farming operations and registered a nonprofit charity, the Piggy Palace Good Time Society, with the Canadian government in 1996, claiming to organize, coordinate, and manage and operate special events, functions, dances, shows, and exhibitions on the behalf of service organizations, sports organizations, and other worthy groups.
Piggy Palace Good Time Society.
Piggy Palace Good Time Society.
They were like just trying to come up with that name. Just like, what?
Also known as the PPGTS.
I won't refer to it as that. But just like, okay, so it's a pig farm.
Yes.
How do we make it sound better?
I think we should call it the Piggy Palace Good Time Society because we're having a good time.
I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and be like, PPGTS.
PPGTS. PPGPS.
I don't think your girlfriend's going to be very happy about that.
Yeah. So its events included raves and wild parties featuring Vancouver sex workers and gathering in the converted slaughterhouse on the farm at 935 Dominion Avenue in Port Coquitlam. I'm going to butcher that every time. While I'm reading it, if you can read me get the pronunciation of that up, because I read that so many times and I thought I had it down in my head, but I guess I just don't. These events attracted as many as 2,000 people, and members of the Hell's Angels were known to frequent the farm. Subsequently, the Pickton brothers ignored the growing legal pressure and held a 1998 New Year's Eve party, after which they were faced with an injunction banning future parties. The police were authorized, quote, to arrest and remove any person attending future events at the farm. The society's nonprofit status was removed the following year, and for inability to produce financial statements, it was subsequently disbanded.
Port Coquitlam.
Port Coquitlam? Mm-hmm. Okay. Coquitlam. Okay.
Coquitlam.
Got it. That's how I thought in my head, but my mouth just didn't.
Your mouth was like, nah.
No, it's Coquitlam. Anyway, so as you can tell, Pickton was a bit of an asshole.
A bit?
A lot of bit.
Yeah.
Who was known to prey on sex workers of Vancouver, BC's Skid Row, known as the Low Track. It's a cold heart is the intersection of Main and Hastings, named Pain and Wastings by the people who know it best. Low Track is the heart of British Columbia's rock bottom drug scene. Estimates its drug user population ranging from 5,000 to 10,000 at any given moment.
Jeez.
Yeah. The drugs of choice are heroin, crack cocaine, supplied by motorcycle gangs or cartels or whoever that stake out choice blocks for themselves and defend their turf with brute force. Most of the low track's female addicts support their habits via prostitution, trolling the streets day and night, haunted creatures rendered skeletal by what one Seattle Times reporter has dubbed the Jenny Crack diet.
Gee.
Swear to God, which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Like it's like they were like Jenny Crack diet. Like that's a good thing to write down. Yeah, thank you, Seattle Times. Love that for you. Safe sex is an illusion in this neighborhood, which boasts the highest HIV rate in North America.
Oh,
the Low
geez.
Track's recent history is a tale of unrelenting failure. Vancouver lured affluent tourists by the hundreds of thousands to Expo 86 for the prospect of easy money, brought a corresponding influx of the poor and hopeless, most of them gravitating towards the downtown east side. Around the same time, competition among drug cartels flooded the district with cheap narcotics, encouraging a new generation of addicts to turn on, tune in, and drop out. Surrounding districts passed new laws to purge their streets of prostitutes, driving the women out of Burnaby and North Vancouver into the downtown east side, putting them all right in the same place, just like LA did with Skid Row.
Right.
In 1994, federal cutbacks left welfare recipients short on cash, while mental hospitals disgorged patients into the streets. You know, it's a tale of its time.
Yeah.
By 1997, careless sex and shared needles had taken their toll in Low Track. 1/4 of the neighborhood's residents testing HIV positive.
Jeez.
So far, government needle exchange programs have failed to stem the plague, despite the provision of some 2.8 million needles in the Low Track each year. Man. Yeah, pretty crazy. So you can kind of get an idea. Excuse me. So you can kind of get an idea of what this place was like around this year, like these years, and I'm sure even now it's not any better.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It does sound a lot like LA and how LA was like, we're just going to put you all in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, in Vancouver, BC, they also have, what are those places called? Like safe zones where you can go do drugs and they supply like clean needles and all that stuff for the...
We have that here too.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where if you're not going to be comfortable with some really fucked up stuff, this is definitely the time to turn it off. Thank you so much for joining us in episode 90. We'll see you at 91. But for the rest of you, better strap the fuck in because it's about to get real. And I mean really fucked up. So Low Track is infamous for its, quote, kiddie stroll, featuring prostitutes as young as the age of 11. Some of those work the streets while others are secured by their pimps in special trick pads. New prostitutes arrive in the Low Track every day. Runaways and adventure seekers dubbed as Twinkies by those trapped in the life. A 1995 survey of downtown East Side working girls revealed that 73% of them entered the sex trade as children, and the same percent were unwed mothers, averaging 3 children each. Of those, 90% had lost children to the state. Fewer than half knew where their children were. More than 80% of the Low Track's prostitutes were born and raised outside of Vancouver. And in 1998, they averaged 1 death per day of drug overdoses and the highest rate in Canadian history.
Wow.
But there were other dangers in the streets as well. 3 years before the Expo 86 gates opened its gates, prostitutes began to vanish from Low Track. By the time police noticed the trend, 14 years later,
Jesus.
More than 24 had already disappeared without a trace.
Took them 14 years to notice 24 women were missing?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yep. Prostitutes and sex workers are, by nature, tend to be elusive. Many begin as adolescent runaways and never lose the habit of evasion, changing names, addresses, and so often that investigators have no realistic hope of tracking a specific, sex worker for any length of time. When prostitutes vanish, as opposed to being slain and left in the garbage dumpsters, motel rooms, and canals, vacant lots, no one can say with any certainty if they have disappeared by choice or through foul play. And too often, no one cares, which is the unfortunate case. No pattern was discernible in the early cases. Rebecca Guno, 23, was last seen alive June 22nd, 1983. Reported missing 3 days later. Most of the downtown's East Side women's vanished were not promptly missed, essentially. The next official victim was 43-year-old Sherry Rail, would not be reported until at least 3 years after her January 1984 disappearance.
Jesus.
3-year-old Elaine Aubach told friends that she was moving to Seattle in March of... 33-year-old Elaine Aubach told her friends she was moving to Seattle in March of 1986, but she never arrived after being reported missing in mid-April. Teresa Ann Williams, age 26, was last seen alive July of 1988, reported missing in March of 89. 4 months elapsed between August 1989 disappearance of 40-year-old mental patient Ingrid Soet and a report to police on October 1st, 1990. Another victim, Kathleen Wadley, was 39 years old when she vanished in 1992 and was reported missing on the 29th of that month.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So it really did vary. Some were reported pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas some, it took way too long.
Yeah, that's correct. Jeez. So, to continue on, an unknown predator or predators took a 3-year the unknown predators or predator took a 3-year vacation before claiming 47-year-old Kathleen Gonzalez on March 1995. Her disappearance was reported to authorities on February 9th, 1996, almost a whole year later. The year's second victim in April, 32-year-old Kathleen Knight, missing 7 months before police received a report on November 11th. Dorothy Spence, a 36-year-old woman, also vanished 4 months after Knight in August of 1995, but her disappearance was reported earlier on October 30th. The year's last victim would be Diana Melnick, age 23. It was lost in December and then reported 4 days later after Christmas. So, again, the hunt kind of gets stalled. People stopped missing for a little while. And then in October 1996, 24-year-old Tanya Hollick disappeared, reported on November 3rd. Olivia Williams, rated less concerned at age 22. Her 1996 disappearance ignored until July 4th, 1997.
Jeez.
I mean, that one I can understand. At first, be like, she's 22. She's probably like, I'm out of this fucking town. She leaves, but like almost a whole year, you're like, okay, something's happening. Stephanie Lane, youngest victim so far at age 20, was hospitalized for an episode of drug psychosis on March 10th, 1997. Released the following day, was last seen alive at the Patricia Hotel in Hastings Street. Janet Henry survived a near miss with the serial killer Clifford Olson in the 1980s. Drugged but spared by Olson for unknown reasons, yet she wound up in the low track a decade later and met another predator. She was reported missing on June 28th, 1997, 2 days after her last contact with relatives. I'm gonna keep going. It's quite the list.
Jeez. Yeah.
August 1997 was the most lethal month to date. 3 women lost, according to police, who would not learn about those cases for more than a year. Marnie Frey, age 25, was reported missing on September 4th, 1998. 19 days later, on September 23rd, first missing person was filed on 32-year-old Helen Hallmark. Jacqueline Murdoch, age 28, was not reported missing until October 3rd, 1998, and detectives are still unsure of when she actually disappeared.
Jeez. God.
I'm still not done. The next victim, officially, that we know of, 33-year-old Cindy Beck, dropped out of sight in September 1997, but her disappearance was reported on August 30th, 1998, 4 months before the 1st of August missing women, which was Andrea Bohaven's friends recalled that she, quote, never had an address and just kind of bounced off the walls. She vanished sometime between 1997 and they believe but no one bothered to inform the police until May 18th of 1999. 39-year-old Carrie Koski was popular by contrast, and she disappeared January 1998 and was reported missing on the 29th of that month. Keep going. 4 more women would vanish before Vancouver's police took interest in the case.
God.
You hear that? Did you just hear all of what I just said?
All these women, and yet they're still not.
All of these women.
Not.
And
caring.
I just now police are starting to go like, well, not even yet. The next 4 have to go missing.
Yeah.
Then the police are going to be like, something's happening here. Jacqueline McDonald, age 23, disappeared in mid-January 1998, officially reported missing on February 22nd, 1999. Igna Hall, 46 or 47, was last seen alive February 1993. Her disappearance lodged a remarkable celerity on March 3rd. 29-year-old Sarah Jane DeVries was last seen alive on April 14th, 1998, reported missing by friends the same day. She left behind a diary filled with observations on a stunted life, including this quote, I think my hate is going to be my destination, my executioner. And then Sheila Egan, a prostitute since age 15, vanished at age 20 in July of 1998 and was reported on August 5th. As that lethal summer warned, detectives Vancouver were about to have a nightmare thrust upon them, and it continues to the present day, and only time will tell if this will ever be stopped. And I don't ever see it stopping. There has to be some major changes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The official search for Vancouver's missing women began in September of 1998 after a Aboriginal group sent police a list of victims allegedly murdered in downtown East Side with a demand for a thorough investigation. Authorities examined the list and pronounced it flawed. Some of its, quote, victims had died from diseases or drug overdose. Others had left Vancouver and were found alive. But Detective Dave Dixon was intrigued by the complaint and launched his own inquiry, drawing up a list of low-track women who had simply disappeared without a trace. There was enough names on that second list to worry Dixon and inspire his superiors to create an investigative task force. Dave Dixon, good fucking job, dude.
Honestly.
The one dude who it finally gets to him, and he's like, he notices a pattern, and he's like, we got to do something about this.
Yeah.
Fucking absolute legend. The 4-year search for answers has finally begun.
Wow.
Vancouver police began to review with 40 unresolved disappearances of local women dating back to 1971. The loss came from all walks of life in all parts of Vancouver, but the search for a pattern narrowed to the roster to 16 low-track prostitutes reported missing since 1995. By the time detectives made their first arrest in the case, that list would grow to include 54 women, which had vanished between 1983 and 2001, with 85 investigators assigned to the case. But in the early stages of the search, police were busy trying to decide whether they had a serial killer at large in Vancouver. And unbeknownst to them, they did. One who thought so was Inspector Kim Rossmo, creator of the geographic profiling technique designed to map unsolved crimes and highlight any pattern or criminal signatures overlooked by detectives assigned to individual cases, which is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
You can see a pattern of like, hey, these people are strangled. It's like FBI criminal profiling in a sense.
Yeah.
In May of 1999, Rossmo reported an unusual concentration of disappearances in downtown Eastside, but police dismissed the notion in their public statements, insisting that the vanished women might have just left Vancouver voluntarily in search of greener streets. Detective Gary Greer advised the press, quote, "We're in no way saying there's a serial killer out there. We're in no way saying that all these people are dead. We're not saying any of that." Rossmo, meanwhile, stood by his theory and resigned from the police force after receiving a punitive demotion. His subsequent lawsuit against the Vancouver PD was dismissed.
Okay, but like, how often do we hear like, oh, there's not a serial killer right now? We're not saying that there is, but there absolutely fucking is. Like, we just went through this here.
We just went through this, yeah. And
They were like, nah, there's no serial killer. And then lo and fucking behold, there was.
yeah, and it was also kind of fucked up that this guy's like, hey, there's a serial killer. And then they're like, demoted. And you're like,
Yeah.
it's like, what the fuck, dude?
Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
But okay.
It's pretty stupid. Internal, excuse me. I thought I was going to burp. So basically, it was like Canada's violent crime linkage system did not track missing persons without some evidence of foul play, and task force investigators were so far empty-handed with trying to find these women who had gone missing. In an absence of a corpse or a crime scene, even a specific date for most of the disappearance, forensic evidence was non-existent. Pimps and prostitutes were naturally reluctant to cooperate with the same officers who might throw them in jail. At one point, detectives identified a man who had serially assaulted 5 prostitutes in 2 months, but none of the victims would file a complaint. Resources were perpetually limited, and despite increasing media attention, to close the case. They kind of just were like, solve the case, but we're not going to give you anything to help you solve the case, and we're going to blame it all on you.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Is prostitution legal in Canada?
I don't believe so.
There's like an awfully lot of them.
Yeah, but I feel like that's everywhere.
I guess,
That's
everywhere
a
you
major
go.
city.
Yeah.
Still, the detectives forged ahead the best they could, and in June of 1999, they met with relatives of several missing women, seeking information and DNA material for prospective identification of remains. Police and coroners' databases were reviewed throughout Canada and the United States, as were various drug rehabilitation facilities, witness protection programs, hospitals, mental institutions, and AIDS hospices. Burial records at Glenhaven Cemetery were examined going back to 1978. Grim news came from Edmonton, Alberta, where police had lodged 12 unsolved prostitute murders between 1986 and 1993. And then another 4 prostitutes had been killed and dumped around Augustus between 1995 and 1996, but none of them were missing from the low track list. The search went on, each new day reminding officers that they were literally clueless, chasing shadows in the dark. So, with this will come a lot of suspects. Police were never entirely without suspects when prostitutes were victimized. In fact, more common problems is too many suspects, with sex workers often unwilling to file charges or testify at trial. So it was in Vancouver as the task force began logging names and descriptions of potential predators. One of whom considered was 36-year-old Michael Leopold, arrested in 1996 for assaulting a low-track prostitute, beating her, and trying to force a rubber ball down her throat. A passerby heard the girl's screams and frightened Leopold away, but he surrendered to police 3 days later. Granted, he had been in custody since then and held in lieu of bond while he awaited trial, but with disappearances dating back to the mid-'80s, any sadist with any propensity for attacking prostitutes rated a closer look. Leopold regaled a court-appointed psychiatrist with his fantasies of kidnapping, raping, and murdering prostitutes, but he insisted that the 1996 assault had been his only foray into the real-life action. Task force investigators ultimately absolved Leopold of involvement in the disappearances, but he had a rude surprise in store for him in his trial. In August of 2000, Leopold was convicted of aggravated assault and received 14 years in prison. and he got 4 years time served, so 10 years. But he did 14. Another suspect was a 43-year-old Alberta native, Barry Thomas Nidemare, convicted in 1990 of pimping a 14-year-old girl. Nidemare apparently left prison with a grudge against prostitutes. In 1995, he was jailed again, this time for selling contraband cigarettes from his Vancouver tobacco shop, driven out of business by a heavy fine. April 2000, Vancouver police charged him with violent attacks on 7 low-track prostitutes. The charges against him were including assault, kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, unlawful confinement, and administering a noxious substance. None of his alleged victims were drawn from the Vancouver's missing list, and Constable Anne Drainan told reporters it's impossible to say at this point whether or not he may be related to those cases. Certainly, he is a person of interest, and he will continue to be a person of interest. More frustrating still, there were suspects described to police without names or addresses. On August 10th of 2001, Vancouver police announced their search for an identified rapist who attacked a 38-year-old woman outside of her low-track hotel a week earlier. During the attack, police spokesperson said the man claimed responsibility for sexually assaulting and killing other women in the downtown east side. The victim had escaped by leaping from her rapist's car. When she offered a description to authorities, the boastful predator remains at large. And there are countless more beside all these. There's so many more. The Downtown East Side Youth Activity Society maintains a daily, quote, bad date file, page after page of report from local prostitutes who have been threatened or injured by nameless tricks. Their tales run a gamut from verbal abuse to beating, stabbings, and presented as a warning for those who support themselves and their habits on the streets. It is all in vain. Did Jack just open the door?
He did somehow.
I don't know how he did.
He did somehow.
I'm going to close this.
That's scary.
Somehow this dog jumped on the door and opened it. But
That's scared.
That was quite something. I've never...
I got so spooked. Like I'm sure it's on camera where I'm just like staring at the door while he's reading. So I'm so fucking spooked.
I thought it was like our roommate coming in to say something, and I was like, oh, like
he wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Jax would.
He just wanted in.
He said, "You've been gone for too long."
He said, "Dad, you were gone for way too long." Anyway, let's jump back into it after that fun scare. In late 1998, task force detectives got their best lead yet from 37-year-old Bill Hiscox. Is it Hiscox?
I think it's his Cox.
Yeah.
Hiscox.
Hiscox is probably whatever. It's probably Hiscox. I don't know. Widowed 2 years earlier, Bill had turned to drugs and alcohol after his wife died. Rescued from the downhill slide when his foster sister found him a job at P&B Salvage in Surrey, just southeast of Vancouver. The proprietors were Robert Willie Pickton and his brother David of Port Coquitlam. Coquitlam. Thank you. See, I'm going to have to just point to you. Hiscox's helpful relative was Robert Pickton's off-and-on girlfriend in 1997. Hiscox picked up his paychecks at the brothers' Port Coquitlam pig farm, described by Hiscox as, like I said before, creepy-looking place, patrolled by a 600-pound boar. He said, quote, "I never saw a pig like that who would chase you and bite at you," he told police. "I was running out with the dogs around the property."
Dude, I would not fuck with a 600-pound boar.
That's a big.
That's fucking terrifying.
That's a big boar.
Not only is it a big boar, I mean, boars are just kind of like more aggressive in general.
Yeah.
So no fucking thank you. I don't. No.
That's a huge bitch.
Yeah, it is. That's gnarly. Hitchcock had grown concerned about the Picktons after reading newspaper reports on Vancouver's missing women. Robert Pickton was again, pretty quiet guy, hard to strike up a conversation with, but I don't think he had much use for men, said Hitchcock. Pickton drove a converted bus with deeply tinted windows. Hitchcock told authorities, quote, "It was Willie's pride and joy," he said, and that he wouldn't part with it for anything. Willie used it a lot. And the brothers also ran the Piggy Palace Good Time Society, and they ran all their fucking stupid events. So let's see. I must have double put some of this in here. I did put some of this double in here. Excuse me.
This is just saying like the police were already familiar.
Yeah. So like I stated before, law enforcement was already familiar with him and all that. So we were talking about how before Pickton had assaulted a prostitute, and she took his knife and stabbed him with it. The stabbing had crystallized Bill Hitchcock's suspicion about Robert Pickton, whom he had called quite a strange character. Aside from the assault, Hitchcock told police there were all the girls that were going missing and all the purses and IDs that were out there in his trailer and stuff. Pickton, Hitchcock told detectives, frequents the downtown area all the time looking for girls. So he had kind of started to pick up on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is the dog going to be okay in here?
Yeah, she's fine.
Okay. Police recorded Hitchcock's statement, and the detective accompanied him to the pig farm afterward, vowing to, quote, push the higher-ups all the way to the top to investigate. Subsequent press reports indicate the farm was searched 3 times, apparently without result. The brothers would remain on file as persons of interest to the inquiry, but no surveillance was ever mounted on them on the farm.
What? What?
Yeah.
They were like, there's someone who's like, I have really good suspicion, like he's got a bunch of purses and IDs, and like he frequents there, and no one was like, maybe we should watch this guy. Yeah,
I don't know. It's pretty stupid.
What the
Back
fuck?
in Vancouver, meanwhile, a list of missing women grew larger with no end in sight. As the new millennium dawned in Vancouver, the task force investigating had expanded to include more than 3 times the number of missing women initially listed in 1998. Some of the new presumed victims had gone missing since the 1980s, their disappearance recognized only now, while others continued to vanish on the low track while the search still in progress. Warnings and surveillance went for nothing. It seemed as more women dropped out of sight.
Like, the thing is so with the police, like just going around and being like, hey, be extra careful. The problem is like they're also not saying that there could be a possible serial killer in the area. So at the same time, I can see how like these women were like, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
But also like they still have bills to pay and all of that. So it's like, y'all aren't doing a very good job.
Yeah, there's no public saying like, hey, there's a serial killer.
Yeah.
Like, don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Nonetheless, until there's like an actual like way to help, they're not going to stop working because that's the only way to like have a livelihood.
Yeah.
Like,
true. From the 80s, police now list presumed kidnapped victims. Leigh Minor, last seen December of 1984. Laura Ma, whose disappearance was listed simply as 1985. Details were equally lacking of the vanished Nancy Clark, 1991. Elise Sebastian, 1992. 17-year-old Angelina Arsenault, 1994. Detectives had a month for Frances Young, April 1996, but no other details were available concerning the 38-year-old woman's final days. Police acknowledged the disappearance of 3 more women in 1997. You can see how long this list is getting.
Yeah.
And at the end of the podcast, I'm going to share with you how long this list actually is. And it's mind-melting. Bringing that, so 3 more women went missing in 1997, bringing the years total to 9 missing, but evidence remained elusive. Of those 3, 52-year-old Mariah Liberté, La Liberté, had made her last known appearance in Low Track on New Year's Day, but victims Cindy Felks. Yeah, it's I have such a hard time reading last names. I can read all day long, but I have such a hard time reading last names. It's probably because I have brain damage from hitting my head too much, which is probably real. And Sherry Irving proved less accommodating. Their movements were so erratic that police could not pinpoint their season of disappearances, much less specific dates. And so it went on. 37-year-old Ruby Hardy vanished sometime in 1998, but she was not reported missing March 27th, 2002. Wendy Crawford, Jenny Firminger, Georgina Papin all disappeared in 1999. Ignored until police listed their names in March of 2000. A month later, and April 25th, 2000, detectives acknowledged the February 1999 disappearance of 32-year-old Brenda Wolf. Tiffany Drew, age 27, vanished on December 31st, 1999. And she would not make the list for another 2 fucking years. And being reported missing on February 8th, 2002. It goes on and on and on, and I'm still not done.
That's crazy.
Isn't that fucking insane?
Yeah.
You can see Spirit on camera.
She was popping up.
That's intense.
Yeah, we have our Marty has his dog with him. Yeah, Jaxie boy, and then we have our lovely Spear, and they're trying our best to keep me from going off the fucking rails.
Exactly.
Because I'm gonna go off the rails. Thank you, Spear. All the times it seemed like a hopeless cause, but Vancouver police persevered. Slowly, publicity began to make a difference, if only in the speed of which new missing persons were reported. Don Cray, age 42, was last seen alive November 1st, 2000, reported missing on December 11th. 43-year-old Deborah Lynn Jones vanished on December 21st, 2000. Her disappearance logged on Christmas Day. Police stalled unaccountability on a listing. Patricia Johnson, last seen alive February 27th, 2000. But 34-year-old Yvonne Bowen was listed on March 21st, 2001. Only 5 days after she vanished, Heather Bottomley, a 24-year-old woman described in Vancouver police reports as having a violent suicide risk, held the record, reported missing the same day she vanished on April 17th, 2001. That is probably the only victim that was reported missing on the same day.
That's fucking crazy.
The main it usually ranges between 4 months and over a year.
Yeah.
So.
No, it definitely ranges.
Yeah. Heather Chinook disappeared that same month, following by Angela Jonesberry in June. Serena Abotswe in July. 34-year-old Diane Rock vanished on October 9th, 2001. Reported missing on December 13th. Mona Wilson, age 26, was last seen alive December 23rd, 2001. Added to the list a week later. Oh, take a breath for a second.
Yeah, this has been going on for almost a decade.
Over.
Missing women.
Right?
Oh, yeah, over.
Over.
Well, didn't it start in 1990? Was that
80s?
80s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A long fucking time.
No, it's been going on for a long time.
Long time. Whatever progress detectives had made tracking disappearances, the killer, if indeed there was a killer, seemed to have grown more brazen, striking at a pace unrivaled since the disappearances began. Police, for their part, could only watch and wait for their fearless quarry to make a mistake that would finally place him within their grasp. Police suspected several killers in the cases such as Gary Ridgway, Dayton Rogers, Keith Jefferson, and so on. But none of those times matched up with where those people were and, the victims and modus operandi, essentially. But the way the walls come crumbling down for Robert Pickton was not because of DNA or a family test or victim testimony, but because of one former disgruntled employee.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Good.
And we've already talked about him. So we're going to cycle back to the beginning. On February 6, 2002, police executed a search warrant on a farm in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada, because of a former truck driver's for the Pickton family. The driver had told the RCMP he had seen illegal firearms in Pickton's house, and during the search warrant, police recovered several illegal items and unregistered guns, and that was Mr. Hitchcock's.
Oh, good.
So he had spotted these guns, and he had already had suspicion that the Picktons were involved in this, especially Robert Pickton,
right,
specifically. And he went out of his way to go and shut it down.
Well, he had also told them previously, too.
He did.
Or was this was two separate reports, I assume?
Yeah.
His name should be Robert Hugecox because that guy fucks, bro.
Yeah, that's Bill.
Oh, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, yeah.
Yeah. But police found much more than these guns. Within the mix of all the mess, police found items linking missing women to the property, such as women's clothes, shoes, jewelry, and an asthma inhaler prescribed to Serena Abotsway, a missing woman that we talked about previously. Pickton was obviously arrested.
Fucking good.
Yeah. While in jail, Pickton was cocky and as awful as every other serial killer. With the deeds of his misery burning a figurative hole in his pocket, Pickton wanted to brag about his crimes. So he's in jail. He decides to brag about his murders to his fellow cellmate, who, much to the surprise of Pickton, was an undercover RCMP officer. RCMP, if you don't know, it's Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It's like the federal state police.
Right. They did that on fucking purpose.
For sure.
Like they were like,
Yeah.
we know this guy's cocky and we know he's gonna fucking talk. So
Yeah, no, I think that's the fucking just the
icing on the cake.
Yeah, so Pickton stated that he had killed 49 women and wanted to make it 50.
Jesus Christ.
Pickton was rearrested for 2 counts of first-degree murder, which would later turn into 26 counts.
Wow.
Meanwhile, on the farm, police took 200,000 DNA samples, sifted through 383,000 cubic yards of soil in search of human remains, and a $70 million search. They were able to find and recover some of the victims, but I believe that Pickton had killed way more than was discovered.
Probably.
During the trial, the media and the jury discovered the brutality of Pickton's crimes. There was plenty of coverage on as Pickton showed interest. He even appeared to smile during the analysis of handheld reciprocating saw allegedly used to bisect 3 skulls and cut through other human bones.
Jesus.
There were cut marks on Miss Wolf's jawbone as well as several ribs, 2 heel bones, and several vertebrae that had been collected. 10 of the 45 saw blades came into evidence only because they could not be eliminated as saw blades that were used to cut the bones. The expert was certain that the saw had produced them, but could not identify what kind.
Oh.
Forensic entomologist Dr. Gail Anderson also testified the remains of Abotsway and Jonesbury had been exposed to the elements for several weeks to several months before being stashed in a freezer where they were found. Insects apparently went into the buckets where the remains were and picked up for storage. And their type and stage of development helped them to specifically identify a time frame of the murders.
Oh.
From April into early May, jurors were shown graphic pictures of decomposing heads, hands, and other remains as forensic pathologists testified about the autopsies. The first witnesses agreed that the skulls were cut from both front and behind with a reciprocating saw that had been forced apart where the cuts nearly jointed. He also described the gunshot wounds to 3 victims, alleging ballistics experts could not link the recovered bullets of any of the guns on the property. When Justice James Williams noticed the effect of the evidence, which included images of maggots, skin sloshing, was having some of the female jurors, he called for a recess. The next day, they heard that a .22 caliber revolver with a dildo attached over the barrel had yielded DNA from a victim and possibly from Pickton.
That is gnarly.
fucking Christ.
And this is me essentially dumbing down the testimonies, right? For the sake of sanity.
Yeah.
Violent deaths
Yeah.
at the hands of Robert Pickton. And even more so, he would have, I mean, whether it's confirmed or not, he fed into the pigs. And those pigs were slaughtered and sold at meat markets across Vancouver.
Yeah.
So people might have unintentionally consumed human remains. Finally, forensic chemist Tony Fung testified that a substance found in a syringe that came from Pickton's office was methanol, commonly used in windshield wiper fluid. Cat-Can West News Service indicated that an acquaintance of Pickton's had mentioned his statement about using a type of fluid to kill drug addicts. However, no methanol had shown up in any tests in the remains of victims in question. Traces of cocaine were found in all the tissue samples, along with methadone and diazepam, but toxicologist Heather Din declined to state that the concentration of drugs had been fatal. Anthropologists took the stand to describe the examination of tens of thousands of bone fragments in a pile, most of which were proved to be from animals, but few of which were human. Specifically, they found a human toe, heel, and rib bones. During the second week of May, the forensic stage briefly gave way to the human face with no change from the defense. And May 10th, after 78 witnesses had taken the stand, the jury began to learned how Brenda Wolf, the mother of 2, had asked for government assistance for food because she'd spent what little money she had to get good Christmas presents for her kids. Reporter Greg Joyce described the 24-page booklet composed for the court about the victims, and that and said that Pickton seemed to read this along with the Crown's attorney, George Ahern. Known movements of each victim were mapped throughout pharmacy and medical records, police contacts, and welfare requests, but it was dry data compared to what was to come. Elaine Allen, employed at the Women's Information Safe House, also known as WISH Drop-In Center, had known 5 of the 6 victims and told the jury that what she knew about them. How Andrea spoke softly, how Georgia Papin was charming and outspoken, how the opinionated Serena was often beat up and showed numerous track marks from drug abuse, while Mona had a demanding boyfriend who sent her out to make money. Andrea, she said, had been the best behaved client she ever had, along with polite and aware of the needs of others, and often spoke quietly about her difficult life.
Jeez.
So,
That's intense, yeah.
pretty intense.
Yeah. That's actually super fucking intense.
Yeah. And yeah, it's quite a lot. It's quite heavy. But for good reason.
Yeah.
To put this fucking dickhead away.
Yeah.
Others who had known these women before they disappeared also testified. One had run a focus group attended by women from the streets, and the jury had learned that in some cases the women worked as prostitutes to feed their children because welfare payments were insufficient. Other witnesses of the friend of Georgia Papin, and she described how she had spent time baking and playing cards together, but then Georgia fell back into drug use and was gone way too soon. Then a former prostitute and drug dealer told her friend Brenda Wolf, who had vanished in the spring of 2000. Brenda deteriorated to the point of not bathing or washing her clothes before she disappeared, and she was a mess, according to her, and lost about 50 pounds prior to her disappearance. But testimony about the victims was notably spare. Thus far, the victims' families have not been called. The next stage involved what Pickton might have done to the women after they died. Jim Kress, a driver for the Vancouver rendering company, described how he had picked up 2 to 5 45-gallon barrels of pork offal and burnt meat chunks from the Pickton farm to take to West Coast reduction. Before 2002, customers could dump stuff at the plant themselves unsupervised. Kress had seen Pickton there once. While this testimony is suggestive, given the statement Pickton made about the victim disposal, it is not proof of anything sinister, but there's a high chance that, again, people consumed human remains.
That's fucking terrifying.
Yes. So, it continues. In the courtroom in the first half of July, with 2 controversial witnesses offering potentially explosive testimony. Both were acquaintances of Pickton's. The first was only mildly interesting, although Canadian papers had created a great anticipation, but the second stirred several edgy moments. Pat Casanova, which is a fucking badass name.
That's a pretty good name.
Yeah, that's Pat Casanova. That's a fucking solid name, dude. Once arrested during the investigation of 15 of the victims now associated with Pickton, used to regularly butcher pigs on the Pickton farm, but could not recall ever using the freezer where remains of the 2 victims were found in 2002. He said that Pickton had done so. However, he said that at a preliminary hearing at the times he in fact used the freezer up until a month before Pickton's arrest, so the truth about the issue remains unsolved. It hovered for the rest of the testimony. Casanova, married and suffering from a treatment of throat cancer, admitted that he received oral sex from one of the victims, Andrea Jonesberry, while in Pickton's trailer. He remembered her as the name of Angel, and that Dinah Taylor had brought her to the farm. Casanova had paid Taylor, who gave some of the money to Angel. Casanova said that he noticed the items in the trailer and some of the purses that belonged to women who were not present, but admitted that Pickton had never spoke with him about missing women. Casanova had known Pickton for approximately 2 decades and had seen him angry only once, according to him. Being caught in a lie in earlier statements, Casanova admitted that he had told police about Pickton he had told the police after Pickton was arrested that he sexually engaged on the farm with only one woman, Roxanne. He never mentioned an angel and the fact that he might have been the last person to see her alive. The defense attorneys seemed to hope and poise Casanova as a good suspect in Angel's murder, although he was not charged with it after his arrest. In any event, the jury did see that Casanova was able to lie easily to protect himself. Thus, he was less than credible witness, especially because he had told the police officer that he doesn't lie. Casanova defended himself on this point with the notion that he's sometimes forgetful, but that sounds like something a liar would say.
That actually really does, yeah.
Yeah. Regarding certain pieces of evidence, he explains his DNA on the slaughterhouse door as a result of mucus spewed after his throat treatments. He denied using orange bags for carrying butchered pigs, deflecting from the implication that he might be the killer since the victim's DNA was found on such a bag. Whether Pickton's attorneys were successful at transferring suspicion from their client onto Casanova remains to be seen, but this did manage to undermine the claim of his honesty. Similarity, they attacked the next prosecution witness, but to a greater effect. Scott Chubb, which is also a really odd name. It sounds like it's just a weird name. It'd be funny if you're like really small.
Yeah.
You know, that's Scott Chubb. I'm Scott Chubb. So Scott Chubb was one of the prosecution's key witnesses, writes Robert Mattis for the Globe and Mail. Having visited the farm having visited the farm at a great deal and been privy to certain dark comments Pickton had reportedly made. He was the informant who originally led police to the farm. I was wrong before. It was this guy. I was thinking of the wrong guy. So it was Scott Chubb who had brought police to the farm originally. He met Pickton in 1993, becoming an employee, allowing himself to be videotaped early 2002 as he related to what he knew from his dealings with Pickton. The jury had seen the tape, says Greg Joyce from Canada.com. A police officer, Constable Nathan Wells, had cultivated Chubb as an informant, paying him about $1,500 altogether. Thanks to what Chubb revealed falsely, turns out, they were able to get a warrant to search for illegal weapons. Wells said at the time he was unaware that Pickton was a suspect in the disappearance of women from the east side of Vancouver. He believed only that he was confiscating an illegal gun.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Chubb basically lied to police to get them to investigate. It sounds like, because he said that the testimony was false.
Yes. So he was arrested because like law enforcement did the search for the guns and they recovered these guns. Whether or not like they were illegal or not is subjective.
Yeah.
But they were able to find some of these items, like the clothing and stuff, and they were able to match it up with Pickton, and he was arrested again. And that's when he was in jail, and he was like, 49 women to kill 50. You know, that whole fucking bullshit. Yeah. Prosecutor Jeff Beauregard led Chubb, a former heroin user, through testimony that included the fact that he had a strange conversation with Pickton one day. Pickton mentioned that a woman named Lynn Ellingson was costing him a lot of money, and he wanted Chubb to, quote, talk to her. Chubb understood that meant that Chubb should hurt or get rid of her. The police had suspected that she was blackmailing Pickton over something that she had witnessed. Ethan Barron of Kent West News indicated that Chubb said Pickton had offered him $1,000 for this favor, but the subject grew even darker. During the course of this conversation, Chubb said that Pickton had told him that it was easy to kill drug addicts because they had needle marks and track marks already. If a person injected windshield washer fluid into them, they would die, and police would dismiss it as a result of a drug overdose.
Oh.
That sound familiar?
Yeah.
The jury already learned the investigators found a syringe containing windshield washer fluid in Pickton's trailer. This seemed like pretty damning testimony. But under cross-contamination, Pickton's attorney, Peter Ritchie, put Chubb on the spot, intending to show that he was a malleable person. Easily exploited to the state whatever facts the prosecutor required, even in the contradiction to things he already said. He wanted Chubb to admit that he'd been trying to get money from the police in exchange for his testimony, to the tune of several $1,000s, but Chubb said it was for protection for himself and his family in case of Pickton's brother, who threatened him to come after him. He denied being paid as informant, although police notes indicated that he'd been paid specifically for information. So, yeah. There were other contradictions too, but Chubb offered a head injury as an excuse for poor memory. Still, his comments sounded more like revisionist memory.
Oh.
He denied and then admitted to certain facts, such as his claims that he did not know how much about the guns and had only handled the Picktons. And was when he actually had a conviction for possession of an unregistered weapon. In explaining why he had gone to the police at all, he said that he was going to go after a drug dealer to get help. To help get his girlfriend off cocaine. So it's a fucking, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. He supposedly told police at the time that he had seen a forbidden firearm on the property, a MAC-10, but in court, Chubb admitted that he had only been told about it. He said that it was Wells who had got the information confused.
Oh.
So it's like, it was the detective. He was fucked up. I don't know what to tell you. Pickton seemed to be enjoying the dismantling of Chubb's credibility, and some reporters believe that he was nearly ready to laugh despite the grim nature of his accusations. Even so, Chubb told attorneys they could go ahead and attack his character, but he was not the one on trial for 6 counts of murder. Fucking
I like that one.
Drop.
That's pretty good. That's actually really good.
Go say what you want, but at least I'm not that funk. And you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this dog.
What's up?
Oh. What? Yeah.
Sleepy.
Just sleepy.
He's so sleepy.
Jax is usually in here when we're recording H.G.O.
Yeah, he's a pretty calm dude.
It's a calm dude. Unlike the other one.
She's trying her best, but
Yeah.
She's a puppy.
yeah.
It's true. The trial continues, of course. This month, too, a controversial book on the subject, The Pickton File, had been published in Canada by Steve Cameron, detailing early parts of the case and victims' backgrounds. She expects to publish the sequel when the trial concludes. Scott Chubb was one of the prosecution's key witnesses, writes Robert Mattis for the Globe and Mail, having visited the farm in Great Privy. I've already said all that. I don't know why I put this in here twice. So, yeah, looks like I put this in here twice. Hold on. Excuse me.
It happens.
For some reason.
I've done that. I'm like, oh.
I mean, when you get to writing like a long episode, I'm sure it's,
Yeah. So, anyway, to get back to where I was, I put that in here twice. So the trial continues. Again, this Steve Cameron wants to write a book, or has written a book called The Pickton Files. And she was getting ready to release the sequel when the trial was concluded. It surprised some of the jury deliberated so long to return their verdict for Robert Pickton. The 58-year-old hog farmer who had been in court since the early trial of starting in that last January. There was a lot of evidence to get through in the longest trial in Canadian history, and issues apparently weren't always clear-cut. More than 40,000 photos were taken of the crime scene.
God.
235,000 items were seized, and there were some 600,000 exhibits from the lab.
That's
Wow.
fucking nuts.
That is insanity.
That's fucking crazy.
98 witnesses for prosecution and 30 for the defense. Both lay and expert gave testimony. There were 500,000 pages of documents, including background of all 6 victims: Mona Wilson, Brenda Wolfe, Serena Abasway, Andrea Josberry, Georgia Papin, Marnie Fay. Those are the ones that they can prove.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of all of these women.
All of them. In addition, Pickton's tape interrogated spanned over 20 years. In September, the Justice James Williams threw out several days' worth of evidence and instructed jurors to disregard evidence regarding the skull found on the 16-acre hog farm. Unidentified, the remains were referred to as only Jane Doe, and no explanation was offered to why the evidence was withdrawn, except for the presence of the skull could not be directly related to any of the charges, which I think is a bit bullshit.
Yeah.
I agree.
In the end, it doesn't matter, but I think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Once the final arguments wrapped up and the judge had made his final detailed instructions, the jury retired. Working throughout the weekend as November and December came, telling the families of the victims nothing. In fact, the first 3 days, they did not even ask questions, so no one knew whether they struggled over some evidence or legal concept. At one point, the judge decided he had made an error and rephrased his instructions over the defense attorney's protest. Finally, after more than 9 days and into the second weekend, the jury reached a verdict. Pickton was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder, but not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder.
What?
I don't get it.
I don't understand why he wasn't convicted on first-degree murder is with like planning.
With
right?
intent.
With
yes.
intent and planning. And second is like on a spur, right?
In a sense. In a sense. And
you can't prove essentially like it was planned.
Yeah.
Right.
That's correct. I mean, we can't prove without a shadow of a doubt that he was going out to pick up sex women, having sex with them, and then would like kill them. You know, like obviously, like what we're reading, what I've said says that obviously he was doing that, but
like
in a court setting, in a
yeah.
court of law, it's hard to say like, you know, like a first degree murder would be like fucking what's that dude that killed the entire family? Was that fucking Chris Watts?
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like dude was planning it, dude had motives for it, why he was doing it, and then he killed them, and that's all first degree murder. This is like, I mean, he's a serial killer, obviously, but he was doing it because he's a fucking psychopath. But with this, it's like he would like go pick out women at random,
right?
Bring them back, kill them, do whatever with their bodies, and then
even though the person themselves is not pre-planned,
yeah,
I still feel personally like it is first degree murder because the plan to go murder was there. Personally, he may not have like had a specific person where he was like, I'm gonna kill this woman. Like, even though there isn't that,
he didn't know who he was going to kill, but he knew he was going to kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I feel like that's what makes it the difference between first degree and second degree murder, is
which
because
I think is stupid.
I agree, but nonetheless, 6 counts of second degree murder. See you later, scumbag, and you're fucking gone. Just like all of us, many of the courtroom were stunned and disappointed.
You know what? I bet that's why it took him so long.
Yeah.
Because there were people who were like, yeah, it doesn't matter though. Like he still like had the plan to go do that. I bet that's what took him so long.
Yeah.
How long was this trial going on for?
For months and months and months and months.
But it took him 9 days to decide.
To decide
deliberate
the verdict.
Yeah. So while Pickton did receive a life sentence, he could be eligible for parole.
What?
Because it's Canada, and Canada's weird. The jury left his decision in the hands of the judge because it's second degree murder. Here you go. The verdict meant that the jury either did not believe that Pickton had planned on the murders or he had acted on his own, although they clearly did believe that he was involved. The problem with the jurors considering the first degree murder conviction was the absence of obvious smoking gun, which, again, is what we talked about. As of today, Pickton is still in prison. He is allegedly in Kent Institution in British Columbia. Hopefully, he'll fucking die there.
Yeah.
In a weird turn of events, the Pickton farm still exists, but it's not in the way you would imagine. There were a lot of victims. The lot where victims and other evidence was found is now a large neighborhood development. A place where families allow their children to grow and learn, where old folks enjoy their sunset years, and all the while, 28 souls loom in limbo due to a crazed madman. And those victims are Serena Abasway, Mona Lee Wilson, Andrea Jonesbury, Brenda Ann Wolfe, Georgia Faith Papin, Marnie Lee Ann Frey, Jacqueline McDonald, Diane Rock, Heather Bottomley, Jennifer Furminger, Helen Hallmark, Patricia Johnson, Heather Chinook, Tanya Holick, Sherry Irving, Igna Hall, Tiffany Drew, Sarah Jean DeVries, Cynthia Felix, Angela Jardine, Diana Melanick, and a Jane Doe, and subsequently, more and more. Deborah Jones, Wendy Crawford, Carrie Lynn Koski, Andrea Barhaven, Kara Elise, Mary Ann Clark, Yvonne Bowen, and Don Cray. Those are well over the 28, but the last 3 are ones that are suspected to be of Pickton.
I'm still pissed off about the verdict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if I was on that jury, bro, I would have like shit at the people who are like, oh, the second degree. It's like he didn't have like intent to kill someone personally, but he did have evidence of like just such horrendous fucking murders. Yeah. How can you even look past that? I mean, I get
but
the
you
justice.
have to. You
have
have
to. Yeah.
You have to. That's why they're selected. You have to.
Yeah. I couldn't be on a jury like that.
Yeah. You have to look past that to really look at the case as a whole, because it's like what we were saying was, it's like obviously he was going out and killing these women on purpose, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't so much as he was hunting, but not to the extent of like he's like he goes, I'm gonna go kill Angela because of whatever reason, and then he does it. It's like a first degree murder.
Yeah.
But these are like he goes down there and he trolls around in his fucking dumb truck or whatever, and he sees a woman. They get in, then they're gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but he's still in prison. Hopefully he fucking dies soon.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this podcast from prison, make sure you stab him. Do it for me. Do it for me. That'd be nice. I would love.
Do it for Jax right here.
Do it for Jax.
He would love that.
Jax would love if you just beat the fuck out of Robert Pickton.
Come on, Jax.
He's also a big dude.
Is he?
Robert Pickton, yeah. He's a pretty big guy.
Yeah. I mean, pig farmers, usually big guys.
Yeah, he's quite a large man. But thanks so much for joining us in episode 90 of Haunts, Graves, and Omens.
Thank you.
9D. It's pretty cool, man. We did 90 episodes. And if you listen all the way through, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing these 90 episodes with us. If you've been here with us since day one, I fucking love you. And even if you're new, still love you. Nonetheless.
I was talking to Fred pre-podcast, and I think I might try my shot in writing one episode or something.
Do it.
At some point.
Yeah.
You want to do next week?
I'll try. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm down.
Well, that's going to be fun. Episode 91, Marty will fucking be sitting here with me, and Taylor can run cameras.
Is that a good idea?
Yeah. You got it. You got it, champ.
I don't know about that.
Fine. We'll figure it out.
I try my best to run cameras. I'm not very good at it.
You'll figure it out.
We'll admit that. It's okay.
Yeah.
We saw how it went when Marty was on, in New Mexico.
You did just fine.
I did okay.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You know the deal. If you want to follow us, you can. HGOPodcast@gmail.com. You want to send us an email about a topic you want to cover, or you want to tell us a story or something you've experienced. Ghost, aliens, true crime. You know the deal. You know how we are. HGO. That's HGOPodcast@gmail.com. I'm burping into the mic as usual. If you want to follow me, you can directly at I Hunt the Haunted, which is, if you're watching on screen, it's right there. Taylor.
Hi, you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Lunar Thrill. That's the only social media I really use. You can also follow Spirit, who's asleep, so I'm not going to wake her up. You can follow her at Spirit the Turv on Instagram.
Hell yeah.
Martine.
You can follow me at Ghetto Feather.
Thank you so much for being with us for all 90 episodes, and we're ramping up for episode 100. We're going to do, like I said, we're most likely going to do a live version of the podcast, whether it's from a location or it's here at the studio. Is kind of something we have to talk about, which we'll do off camera. We're not going to see her. Actually, fuck it. Let's do it right now. What do you guys want to do?
On location would be kind of cool.
On location would be really cool.
What's your opinion, Marty?
I would like to do an on-location thing.
There it is.
So I think we've decided.
Solved. We did it.
We decided on camera. Look at that.
Look at that. That's pretty cool. But until next week in Marty's episode, I'm holding him to it. Stay spooky
Stay haunted.
and fuck Robert Pickton.
Bitch.